Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Alderman Holmes.
Here.
Alderman Tindem.
Here.
Alderman Grover. Alderman Rainey. 9-0.
We have a quorum. Welcome to the Monday, May 7th, 2012 meeting of the Evanston City Council. First item on the agenda is citizen comment. We have two citizens signed up, Junad Risky and Ms. Giddings. Want some water? Sure.
So I'm gonna. It's interesting, the poor in Evanston have to pay higher and higher water bills to subsidize private developers. Why is this? Last year, $4 million in the sewer funds were transferred to the parking funds. This is public information. It's in the financial report of the city. Excuse me. According to staff, we have $16 million in the parking fund. So why was the $4 million transfer occurring? The city is over $888 million in debt, so what's another $2 million? Last year we had an 8% effective tax increase, which is not acceptable. Using parking funds to be subsidized with water funds is a shell game. It's clear to me staff finds funds for economic development activities and rather questionable assumptions. At the last Economic Development Committee meeting, a staff member made the comment the water fund was basically flush with money. Concerns me that the Economic Development staff sees our water fund as a potential piggy bank. The Economic Development Committee raised the issue of staff. At the Economic Development Committee, I raised the issue of staff providing quarterly financial updates. One committee member dismissed me. Quite frankly, several recent projects here appear to me to be headed for failure. We, the public, would really like to know the status of these projects quickly and what the city is doing really to correct these things. Tonight, the Trader Joe deal shows me rather weak financial analysis and some really rather questionable ROIs that were created. But other recent deals are quite worse. They really show almost no real return on investment and a total waste of our tax dollars. Just remember, at over $88 million in debt, the city's moving closer to bankruptcy. Wally can answer one question tonight for me, since we were talking about him to answer questions, and that is, what is next year's effective tax increase? I'd like to know. He can break the rules, or if there are rules, I'd like to hear what will be our tax increase next year that he's planning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, clearly as we begin looking at the budget preparation, the first thing we do, as we've done every year since I've been your city manager, is to look for ways for efficiencies. And I think on the general operation costs of the city, we have done that and have not required any property tax increase while the time I have been here to do that. The two issues where we've had property tax increases have been in the areas of pensions, where this council has been very forthright to be able to pay down the pension obligation, as well as to be realistic regarding our capital plans. Not 6 months into the year, I can't give you any specific numbers here, but I can tell you that certainly my plan is to make sure that no property tax increase is required for general operations, and to make sure if we would have to look at a property tax increase for pensions or for capital debt, that information comes to you as soon as possible, and the council receive options for other ways to address those large debt issues.
Hello, I'm Cease Giddings. My husband Paul and I own Folkworks Gallery in the Chicago Dempster neighborhood. I grew up in the 1100 block of Hinman. That means Chicago Dempster's been my neighborhood for a long time. I'm not really as old as I look, but I made my first visit to Trader Joe's in 1987. It was in California, and I was swept away. I've been driving to Glenview for the last 20 years, or ever, let's see, 2000, so 12 years. I'm really ready to have a Trader Joe's in Evanston. And I think if you bring it to Chicago Dempster, it will be a mecca for food lovers like me. So I'm very much hoping to see this come to fruition. Thank you.
That concludes citizen comment. We are now on A1, Ordinance 32-012. Does anyone want to make a motion? It's been moved and seconded to approve authorizing the city manager to execute an assignment of real estate contract for the purchase of real property at 1223 to 1225 Chicago Avenue, Evanston. Congratulations, Alderman Nguyen. Johanna, did you want to make a presentation?
If you'd like to hear it.
Go right ahead.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, perhaps just provide some introductory comments. This is an important day for us as your city staff to come before you, what we believe is an excellent investment in this community. As I mentioned earlier, I've been privileged to be your city manager for now almost 3 years, and the work that we have done on economic development throughout Evanston has been a slow process to get started. I think this council, however, has made some very significant moves over the last 12 months. Certainly the work that we have done to invest in properties on Howard Street, the work that we're doing here, the work we're doing at Dempster Dodge on the west side, really all over the city, is really important to make the economic engine of Evanston stronger. It needs to be stronger. It needs to be generating revenue that's not coming from our property tax, and I think everyone is in agreement there. You're going to hear tonight about the details of this project and the investments that we think make sense here. And many communities bringing in a retailer that is going to generate the several $100,000s a year in sales tax. There's often rebates associated with that. In this instance, we are suggesting that city resources be used to stay in the community, to invest in property that we would continue to own, and to be a little creative in doing that. We believe there should be a return on investments. However, not every economic development project we do will have that. Others, certainly with the catalyst projects on Howard Street, the work that we're doing at Dempster Dodge, not every project is different, but I'm happy to report this evening that this is a project that will bring significant tax revenue to the community, will provide a significant part of that economic engine for all of South Evanston. So again, we're very pleased, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Johanna Neiden, our Economic Development Coordinator, for the excellent work she has done on this project. I think this is a sign of good things ahead, and Alderman Burris was very clear when we were here before you with this last, show me the return on investment, and I think she set the bar for us very high, and we hope with this presentation and the staff report that you have, we'll answer those questions about why this is good for the city of Evanston. Ms. Neiden, good evening.
Thank you, City Manager Bachmetz. Good evening, Johanna Neiden, Economic Development Coordinator. Tonight we have before you, I think, most of the answers, if not all of the answers to the questions that have been asked regarding this project. Just want to get everyone up to speed. We've been working with Terrico, which also in some of the packet materials is referred to as Gendel WNB LLC, and I'll just ask them to stand to introduce them. On your left is Scott Gendel, and on your right is Kevin Gaisley. They've been the primary principals that we've been working with on this project. And we met a little bit over a year ago and learned that they had a relationship with Trader Joe's property, the property broker, and started to talk about possible locations at Evanston, and 1211 Chicago Avenue emerged as an ideal site for Trader Joe's. It's located adjacent to existing grocery stores and is on a main arterial. I think it was August of last year that they purchased 1211 Chicago Avenue, and subsequent to that, they obtained a signed lease with Trader Joe's to come to 1211 Chicago Avenue in February. This map just highlights the locations in the Cook County where there are existing Trader Joe's. You'll see that there is a bit of a gap on the North Shore, and we're hoping that the Evanston store will be able to fill that. Here's orientation to the site. The brown is Trader Joe's. To the south is the Shell Station, the Jewel Osco, and the Whole Foods. To the north is the Chicago Dempster Merchant District, as well as the CTA station. And again, one of the pieces of site selection criteria that Trader Joe's really emphasizes is co-location with another existing grocery store. They know that their customers can't do a complete shopping, and they also know that Jewel and Whole Foods customers or Albertsons or Safeway customers prefer to augment their shopping by a trip to Trader Joe's. So tonight we have before you 4 items. Two are the acquisition of two parcels, 1223, 1225 Chicago Avenue and 1229 Chicago Avenue, and then entering the authorization for the city manager to execute parking license agreements at each of these parcels. Real quickly, the site, the building this is the proposed plan for the site. This will have to go through, given the size of the site, it will go through the city's formal plan development process, as well as several community meetings to solicit input from stakeholders and nearby residents and businesses. But this building will be oriented on what is essentially the parking lot of the current structure, 1211, where the former Blockbuster was. And then the parcels to the north, the ones that we're contemplating acquiring, is this one and this one. This is 1223, 1225, and this is 1229. Again, just another site plan of this to describe the parcels. Going from the north, the seller of the property at 1229 is Northwestern. They have a land lease with a leasehold tenant that occupies the house on that property. Going south, the property is owned by an LLC called Sona Realty, and that's what we've called the LA Tan, or for, if you've been here a while, the old True Value hardware site. And to the south is the property that Terraco owns at 1211 Chicago Avenue. Again, here's pictures of the property. 1223, 1225 Chicago Avenue, as the memo discussed, is contemplated to be purchased for $1.4 million. And the property to the right, 1229 Chicago Avenue, is contemplated at being purchased for $650,000. That's a total acquisition of $2.05 million. It's 18,000 square feet, or $114 per square foot. And if this acquisition meets favorably with the council, the property on the left could be purchased within the next month or so, depending on times for closing and inspection periods. The property on the right, 1229 Chicago Avenue, Northwestern has agreed to provide title to the property for us, and we would close, but we would not disperse funds to pay for it. They have agreed for us to pay for the property after the store is open. So it's provided us a bit of insurance that that the Trader Joe's has to go forward for us to expend funds to acquire it. And I think I will turn it over to Marty. Did he just walk out? There you are.
Can we just ask?
Alderman Rainey.
Could we just ask simple questions as we go along to clarify? Johanna, when you look up 1229 Chicago Avenue, are there multiple addresses, or was I seeing something else?
Yeah, and you probably weren't seeing something else. What we've learned. Did you look at the Cook County Recorder of Deeds?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I came across the same thing. What has happened is if a
Actually,
property.
it's not so much the County Recorder of Deeds, but on our own GIS, it shows the UO 3 different or 4 different
Right.
addresses for that.
So the parcel contains the house, as well as the building to the north. It's I think a 3-story mixed use.
Yes.
Right. So the house and the building sit on the same parcel.
Right.
So there's 2 leasehold taxpayers, one for the house and one for the mixed use building.
We're only talking about the house.
We're only talking about the house.
And do we have evidence that leasehold taxes have been paid on that house,
Yes.
by that house? We
Yes.
do?
Yes.
What information do we have about that?
I could.
Because when you go to the Recorder of Deeds, there's no record of the property existing.
And I can tell you why it doesn't exist in the Cook County Recorder of Deeds, because if you talk to the recorder, they'll tell you that if a property hasn't been recorded since 1985, there will be no record of it. They just don't keep a record of it, and it probably hasn't changed hands since I think the 70s.
So any action since 85, then it wouldn't.
It wouldn't
show up,
reflect on
right?
the online, but you could go down and do.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay. So can you let us know what the leasehold taxes are?
I don't have it in front of me, but I can definitely get it to you before the end of the evening.
And it's paid up?
Yes.
Both properties are paid up real
Yes.
estate taxes?
No, the 1223 to 1225 has not paid their real estate taxes as of.
That's when?
They have not paid for the full 2010 tax bill. So that would be obviously when we sell.
Deduct?
Right.
Yeah. One other quick question. These are yes or no questions. One other question. And that is, were we to buy these 2 properties, and there's a license, and I'll talk about that later, but would the property still be city property, even though it's a licensed parking lot to Trader Joe?
I would defer to our legal counsel.
And the reason I'm asking that is if and I noticed all the liability provisions and all of the great work that Michelle did, but I couldn't tell whether or not if a person tripped and fell or two cars ran into each other in one of the lots, could we be held liable for that?
Good evening, Michelle Mason-Cup, Assistant City Attorney. This is a great question. There's a big distinction between a license agreement and a lease agreement. This is specifically a license agreement, so that the city ultimately is in possession and control of the property, but the licensee, WMD, Terraco, this Gendel LLC, will be maintaining the property and on a daily basis. So if there is a slip and fall, as you say, unless the city is found to be, negligent in any way, but we don't maintain it on a daily basis, so likely a court would find that we didn't have any responsibility in that instance. But that's just hypothetical. But this is a license and not a lease.
Alderman Rainey, are you done?
Yes.
Alderman Fisk?
I think Marty had something he wanted to say.
Good evening, members of council, Madam Mayor, Clerk Green. Marty Lyons, Assistant City Manager. I also did check on the financial side of ownership with our independent auditors, and we had a final discussion today. They happen to be out at the city right now. And even with the 70-year contract and with what we are proposing, the asset will be listed as an asset of the city in the parking fund for both the $2.05 million purchase price and the $500,000 contributed capital for the improvement to make the lot.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk?
Yeah, is 1229 Chicago, is that a Evanston landmark?
No, it is not.
This is a council meeting, Ms. Eckersall. We're not. Thank you. Alderman Holmes?
So short answer, the city will own the property.
Yes, that is correct.
Could I ask one other question?
Could Alderman Wilson go first?
Sure, I'll get in line.
Alderman Wilson?
I was going to change gears, so maybe.
Alderman Rainey, he's deferring to you.
This is really for Michelle. Michelle, what are the parameters of ownership when we are we're being asked, it hasn't been approved yet, a 70-year license agreement? How can anything you're not going to have under your control for 70 years be considered an asset? Most of us will not be here in 70 years. I'm sorry, but the fact is, unless something really big happens in the medical field, we probably won't be here.
I'm sorry, is there a legal question?
The legal question, yeah, the legal question is, which was my first sentence,
okay.
How can something you're going to license for 70 years without having control over this property, how can it be considered an asset?
The city will assure, and we have provisions in both of the license agreements for 1223 and 1229 Chicago Avenue. We have provisions in the license agreements that the city ultimately will control and make sure that any repairs are done in a workmanlike manner, that they are, giving proper snow removal and lighting, and we still maintain review over those things. They don't have complete carte blanche control over the property during that time period. We have to ensure that they abide by the terms of the lease. Or I called it a lease, the license agreement.
I can understand if it were a lease, that then it would still be an asset, but I'm just very confused.
Alderman Wilson?
Thank you. With regard to the insurance requirements on the lease, or I'm sorry, on the license, I should say, page 44 of 102. So I'm not sure what page on the document is, but in the packet it's page 44. So the licensee and the licensor, that's us, we're each going to have to maintain our own insurance policies to cover for liability, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any sense of what that policy is going to cost us?
It would just be part of our overall property coverage.
Part of the overall coverage?
It's part of our normal coverage that the city already keeps.
And Alderman Wilson, members of the council, just to refresh your memory how that works, we provide a list of all owned city assets, and that is included under one blanket coverage. So I don't believe, Mr. Lyons, that we break out any particular parcel. We just provide the listing, and the entire catalog of our holdings are then covered under our insurance. Is that correct?
I would say both. We provide a listing, and the entire catalog is totaled, and then we have a total insurance cost with our fairly high self-insurance retention. So for most of these things, we're self-insured anyway.
Which brings me to my next point. Did we consider putting a requirement of the licensee that we be included as additional insured under their policy?
Alderman Wilson and members of the council, Grant, for our corporation council, we have not considered that. But I can say that in terms of the indemnification here, I believe that under the schedule, under the property, that there would be adequate coverage. But that is something that if it was, an amplification that the council would seek in terms of indemnification and bulking up the insurance requirement, we could certainly take that to the other parties. But I think that under the coverage as espoused in the proposed agreement right now, that the city does have more than adequate coverage for indemnification. Also, the other thing to keep in mind is there's two other things in addition to just the insurance requirements that provide additional coverage for the city. Number one, there's obviously the Tort Immunity Act, and number two, in terms of the licensee being responsible for the day-to-day maintenance, I would analogize that to principles under the restatement of torts in terms of the retained control exception, that the licensee would be the first port of call if there was ever going to be a lawsuit instituted. And so that provides an additional layer of a buffer, as it were, for the city in terms of any liability that could possibly flow down to it.
It's more just the potentially catastrophic kind of accident, someone killed in the parking lot in an automobile accident, something of that nature. I would feel much more comfortable with being included on the other policy as well. So somebody filing a case has that avenue of recovery instead of just looking to us.
Are you finished, Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderman Rainey?
On the matter of insurance, I know that our buildings are on the list of properties insured, but I'm wondering, other than self-insured for liability of injuries, et cetera, are our parking lots listed on that list of covered properties?
Yes.
They are.
I believe so.
But do we know so? I mean, I just want to know. I think it's a question that.
For purposes of due diligence, we will verify that answer, but as I stand here tonight, it is correct that they're under that schedule.
But that schedule has to do with replacing damages to the property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But it doesn't include liability. For example, if a car runs into another car and people get hurt.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what really I'm concerned about these parking lots. I'm not so concerned that somebody knocks over one of those concrete stoppers or something, but the real human liability there. That's what I'm concerned about.
Alderman Nguyen?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I believe that Mr. Gendel can respond to this issue.
Yeah, two things.
Can you come up to the microphone?
said it over and over.
Scott Gendel. Two things. One, we would, of course, list the City of Evanston as an additional insured, and we'll put that into the agreement with you. And then the other thing that I would add is, and our general policy coverage, our umbrella coverage, far exceeds the $2 million listed in the agreement, and will for the foreseeable future unless insurance rates go through the roof.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure people sue the City of Evanston more than they would sue your Trader Joe's. I mean, we're just sitting ducks for a lawsuit. If people know we own the property, that's what they do. Sue us.
Alderman Wilson.
And on another point, with regard to the term, obviously it's 70 years. But there is what I'll refer to as an out provision, that if the property ends up being vacant for 12 continuous months, there is the opportunity to basically retake the property. However, that wouldn't come until more than 35 years after the commencement of the term. So my concern is, if the property ends up vacant in 10 years, is it possible that it's going to sit for 25 or 26 more years before we can take it back? I mean, it seems to be that's the way that it's worded.
Alderman Wilson, you're interpreting the language correct. However,
What page are we on?
We are on page 40 of your packet. It's under paragraph number 4, term of the agreement. However, the parties discussed this issue prior to the meeting, and that the intention and it is not reflected in that specific line. If it's declared to be vacant at any point during the term of the agreement, during the 70-year term, so take out that first line, if after any time 35 years of the total term have elapsed. It's at any point. If it is declared to be vacant, then the city has a cure period. We would notice them in accordance with the license agreement and take the proper steps.
So that 35-year
yes,
qualifier
just that
is coming
first
out.
part of the line. Yes, correct.
Coming out. Okay.
It's already been discussed.
Okay.
What?
Can we continue?
Yes, go ahead.
John? Mr. Lyons?
Good evening again. In looking at the finances, as noted previously, this is being proposed to come from the parking fund. So what we have here is the updated yet still unaudited parking fund for the 2011 year. So the reason we picked the audit numbers was to point out the level of assets, and this will become an asset, in the parking fund. So in the subsequent slides, I'll walk through this, but I think what's important to note is that when looking at this slide, the $12,676,000, that top number will reduce by $2,050,000, and then the third number down will increase by $2,550,000 for the contributed capital plus the purchase price. No, we cannot spend fixed assets. That is certainly the case. It will not be funds available for future for other capital improvements in the parking fund. But I will point out that the receivable line that you see, the $5.6 million, still reflects the in-process repayment from the sewer fund to the parking fund, and that is in process. It will show up in the next audit. So we presently paid the last round of loans to EPA this May. So we had to pay everything on a go-forward basis, not on a reimbursement basis when we did the debt last year.
Mr. Lyons, just to be clear then, there's been some question about the relationship between the water fund, sewer fund, and the parking fund. Could you just be clear as to what the transactions has been?
There is no relationship for the water fund in any of this. In September of 2010, the council approved the refinancing of sewer debt And in order to accomplish that in a timely fashion, at one point, rather than issuing two $4 million bonds, we held out and issued one $8 million bond. But in the interim, the parking fund was the bank and loaned the sewer fund the $4 million to maintain its cash flow, and it is all being paid back.
So this is no reflection on the health of the parking fund or really the health of the sewer fund. This was just a easier way for us to borrow money from ourselves versus borrowing money from, at that time, very uncertain financial markets.
And also to avoid an additional service fees from bond counsel and from financial advisors by issuing twice.
Thank you.
So again, just to put it in bullet points, reduces our cash by $2,050,000, increases fixed assets by $2,050,000, adds the lot value of $500,000, but that will be depreciated. So we're not saying that that's going to stay out there forever. Like any of our capital improvements in an enterprise fund, that will go down according to the life of the lot. And doing an analysis of opportunity costs, the investment income that we're presently seeing, our daily rate is 0.3%. Our yearly rate is 0.3%. We're currently not earning a lot. Could that change? It certainly could. The yield curve is currently fairly steep. 5 and 10 years out, you're back up to 3 and 4% on the investments that the city is involved in. But if we compare that with where we're at now, $6,000 is our investment income, 24 spaces. I lowered it from what I had told Mr. Smith at one point of it being $50 a month and put in $35 a month. If it was full, which we have no guarantee that it would be full, but if it was full, that would be $10,080 a year. And then we would also be able to amortize if the lot license fee is envisioned to go back to the parking fund, then that $50,000 could be seen as a return on the investment as well. One of the things that we also look at in development, in this case, we're doing a land purchase. Quite often, we're not involved in the land. We're involved in revenue sharing, which we have other agreements on the books. And in this case, what I've put up here is just in some round numbers. If we were looking at 25 to 50% of the revenue, or $125,000 to $250,000 per year, that would be a cost that in some of our other development agreements we've entered into. I think of the neighborhood improvement funds. We had revenue sharing with sales taxes. So we could have went that route, but there would be no asset at the end of the transaction. And if it were a 10-year arrangement, it would be anywhere from $1,250,000 to $2.5 million in revenues being shared. The way that it is currently structured now, you're looking at a return on the investment in 4 to 6 years, as opposed to if we would have gotten our money in a lot longer time frame if we'd been doing revenue sharing. And we're going back to you.
We don't have this on
No.
or on paper. Yes?
That's on our packet.
That table's in the staff report.
That's on page. That's on page 6 of the packet. So this is a duplicate of the table that's in your packet that outlines local sales tax revenue as well as liquor tax and property tax. I wanted to highlight that we tried to be as conservative as possible in these projections. Industry standards talk about Trader Joe's. A quarter of all sales per square foot of the store are generally supposed to be liquor sales. And we've all heard about the fabulous liquor that you could buy a $2 chuck, and that's what seems to contribute to the 25% of the total sales. We estimated 15% of sales at the store, not because we thought that it would do poorly, but we just wanted to be conservative in our estimates. The property tax, the memo points out that right now the combined taxes paid on the property for the city's portion, they're about $17,000. We base these estimates of the property tax off of the Whole Foods and the Jewel, which are both at about $8 and change per square foot of building. That's where we got those numbers. And then this is just a simple ROI calculation, looking at the range of annual income, municipal revenue over the total investment, and you get a return of between 23 and 32%, which is a very, very good return. And even if we were to say we'd be looking at half of this annual income, we'd still be getting a 12 to 16% return, which is still very good.
Alderman Rainey, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Johanna, how do we know what the range of annual income is?
Well, we don't know for sure, but we know.
How do we guess at that?
Well, Trader Joe's is a private store, so they don't disclose their annual sales numbers. So what we have to rely on is industry reports, standards. The general rule has been $1,800 per square foot of building in sales for stores across the United States. What we've heard just as of last week, the vice president for real estate was in Evanston meeting with staff and the developers and told us that they expect that this store to be a well above average store from a sales perspective. So that's why we generated the 2,500, which based on, again, trying to glean information from comparable communities that have a Trader Joe's. People really will not tell you how much the sales is, nor will another municipality. Glenview nor Northbrook would come close to disclosing if these numbers were even on the mark, but they gave us an impression that this was a welcome store from a revenue standpoint in their communities.
I mean, we know that. I was just wondering how we get. I mean, the numbers could be way more than this. It could be less. It could be right on target. And one of the things I noticed in the lease is that Trader Joe's very firm, and with their landlord, there's absolutely no requirement for representing any gross sales. So, I mean, I'm just wondering how we got it. So if they were in a TIF, if Trader Joe was in a TIF, and maybe they don't go into TIFs, we would know what their sales tax was, because we can identify individual units sales tax.
Good evening, members of council. Alderman Rainey. Actually, for our agreements with the state of Illinois, we will know the sales tax once they're up and running. We know the sales tax for Jewel. We know the sales tax for Dominic's. So once they are up and going, we will know the sales tax. And, of course, since the liquor tax is paid to us, we will know the liquor tax as well. Now, just the reason that, as Johanna pointed out, Glenview and other places did not disclose to us because we would be prohibited from doing the same thing. We may not tell anyone the reason for that, or rather the amounts of sales tax that we're collecting. We actually signed confidentiality agreements.
And that makes sense.
All right, so return on investment, even if it was just at half, it would still be considered very good for this type of investment. Wanted to actually address something you just raised, Alderman Rainey. Trader Joe's does go in TIFs. What will go at the top left is Prescott, Arizona. They just opened this past March, and they spent $2 million from their water fund to purchase about 7 acres of property so a developer could come and build a shopping center that would house a Trader Joe's. And they're doing a land lease on the property for a long period of time. The next to the right, I think some of us will recognize that store. That's in Park Ridge. That is part of a mixed-use development that was in a TIF, and currently still is in a TIF. It's the former Breederman Toyota and Reservoir site in their downtown, and it was approximately $100 million development, of which the developer was provided $16 million for TIF site work, sidewalks, parking, other site prep work that include infrastructure and groundwork. Finally, the last one on the lower left is Arlington Heights. That was also in a TIF. The developer, landlord of this shopping center, was provided $3 million for a $12 million project to build out an annex of a shopping center on Rand Road, and it included, again, parking, sidewalks, and other development site work improvements for this project.
Alderman Rainey.
What kind of incentives did Park Ridge give Trader Joe's to attract them?
They provided no incentives directly to Trader Joe's. What we found in our research was that in almost all cases, Trader Joe's is never the direct recipient of assistance.
Okay, but let me put the question the correct way. What incentives did the city give to the developer to attract Trader Joe?
I think the one that was probably the most poignant was the parking. Trader Joe's requires a significant amount of parking for their development because they know that they experience high volumes at certain periods of the week. So being able to build enough parking to accommodate this user was definitely one of those indirect or direct.
How much money was involved?
I don't know specifically what amount of money. The $16 million was the total package, and it's a decked parking, so that would be probably. That gets very expensive. So I would say at least a quarter, if not a third, was for parking deck.
And do you know about any of the others?
Well, I know that the $12 million, that was the annex in the lower right for where Arlington Heights is. That had a Barnes & Noble, a Panera, and a Trader Joe's that were part of the annex. And I have been at enough conferences that the mayor of Arlington Heights has been present at and has boasted that they went to Boston and attracted a Trader Joe's and said, we'll work with you to bring you here. So, yeah. So I would suspect that a large portion of that was particularly, again, to build out the parking and the build out of the interior store. All right. So now I wanted to run through the different deal points of the parking license agreement. First, on the left, we've outlined some of the financial deal points. The developer has agreed to pay an initial license fee of $25,000 per parcel. So that brings our entire acquisition cost down to $2 million. The developer has also agreed to completely fund the site work and the construction of the parking lot. Mr. Lyons just mentioned $500,000 in site work. And finally, the property will remain taxable because it is a commercial use. And the lease in the Trader Joe's lease with Terrico stipulates that the property will remain taxable and the Trader Joe's will pay for it.
Alderman Rainey.
I'm sorry for asking this question, but is the maintenance and repair of the parking lot in the lease with Terrico, or is it in the license agreement?
I can answer that question. Michelle Mason-Cup, Alderman Rainey. The maintenance and repair responsibilities are covered in the license agreement.
In the license?
Yes, correct.
Can
yep.
you tell me where?
It is paragraph 8. It's page 41 of your packet. It states in part that the licensor, the city, has no obligations for maintenance and repair.
Okay, and a violation of this would violate the license agreement, and what are the sanctions for violating the license agreement? And is this also in the lease with Terrico?
The default provisions are in paragraph 13 of the lease, page 43.
But would this rise to the level of a violation? Like not?
Yes.
Right. I'm wondering, is it in the lease with
it
you?
Is.
It is. Because I like that part of it being in the lease with the landlord.
Yes. I'm deferring to Scott Gendel.
Scott Gendel again. Actually, we have a provision in our license with you that we have to maintain, keep up the parking lot. And while it is being depreciated over a period of time, our obligation is to make any capital improvements or necessary replacements as needed during the term of that license. So the depreciation issue really isn't an issue as it relates to Evanston, because it's our obligation under the lease to not only maintain the property in a first-class fashion, but replace or repair when needed over the course of that lease.
So the obligation is yours, not Trader Joe's?
It's our obligation, but it would be a breach of our lease with Trader Joe's if we did not meet those obligations.
What I was trying to get at was it Trader Joe's responsibility to maintain the parking lot? It is not. It is the developer's.
It's the developer's responsibility, but it would be a default in the lease with Trader Joe's if we did not.
Okay. Trader Joe has to do nothing.
Go ahead, Johanna.
Moving on to term and usage deal points. The license term is for 70 years, as has been already discussed, and I think we just covered the next bullet point. The third, city is protected in the event of a store vacancy. Again, I think Ms. Mason-Cup covered that one. And finally, the city retains the right to 24 parking spaces at the north end of the lot. We recognize that this is a city investment, and we want to make sure that this is a busy neighborhood and that we're able to utilize this as best as possible. So we will be, for these parking spaces, from store close to 8 o'clock, as articulated in the license agreement, we will retain the right to permit and sell licenses for residents, for businesses to utilize these parking spaces. A unique aspect of the license agreement is after a year, after Trader Joe's has figured out their operations and usage of the parking lot, we're going to together work to look at if we can start to use some of the parking spaces during evening operating hours. We know the area is very busy with the different restaurants and other venues, and we know that sometimes in the evening, grocery shopping tapers off towards the late hours. Okay, so then here is some very pointed questions and answers. First, what happens to 1223, 1225 Chicago prior to demolition if we acquire it? The answer is the LA TAM will continue to rent for a period of time prior to demolition. There is a vacant space adjacent. We will, as owners, we would be able to retain the ability to utilize the space for short-term uses, pop-up stores, or art underclass, or other uses to be determined. Next question, what happens to the house at 1229 Chicago Avenue? The developer, Terrico, is working with the leasehold tenant to look at relocating the residence, and then we will work with the developer to determine the feasibility to relocate the house. Then this is another big question. We've had a lot of people ask, what impact will this have on the adjacent stores? And we've seen a lot of discussion recently, why would anyone locate a grocery store next to an existing grocery store? So two grocery stores. And so we considered this quite a bit. We had staff look through just about every Trader Joe's in the country and determine that of the hundreds of stores, about 85% of them are within a half mile of another major grocery store, whether that's a Safeway or an Albertsons or a Fry's or a Whole Foods. Of that percentage, about 15% of the stores are within half a mile of a Whole Foods. So this is one of those site selection criteria. They need to be near another grocery store. That's how they work. They know that their shoppers can't do a complete shopping at their store, and they know that the shoppers from the other stores like to augment their shopping. One of the things that we do know is that there will be a period of impact. But if stores are on a growth path prior to the introduction of a similar goods store, it will taper off and then go back to a growth pattern after 6 or 9 months. The newness of the newly introduced store wears off, and the things sort of work out, and we're back on the growth path. Another point I wanted to raise before we move on to the next slide was that of the 3 stores that we presented that had received assistance, all have other grocery stores operating within a half mile. They either have a Jewel or a Whole Foods or Fry's in the Arizona example or a Whole Foods. And they're all still operating. Again, wanted to show you this map that we saw earlier of the Trader Joe's in the Chicago region. And if you look real quick, the yellow are all ones that have a Whole Foods or a Dominick's or a Walmart, a Jewel within a half a mile of the store. So almost all of them. And what about previous developments and deals for Trader Joe's? We know that 1890 Maple, previously the mixed-use development that was approved, I believe, in 2008, was to include a Trader Joe's in the base of the store. And at that time, the previous council had approved an agreement to provide $1.9 million in assistance. 1.5 of that was a reimbursement of incremental property tax generated by the development, and about $400,000 of that was revenue through a sales tax sharing agreement that would have lasted about 10 years. And as we all know, that was approved before the real estate market implosion. And we're now at a point where the developer has been unable to obtain financing for the project and is continuing to work through the project. But Trader Joe's, like any retailer, will have a provision in their lease to move on to another site if they desire to, if the developer or landlord is not able to perform. And the other question that we get a lot is, when will the store open? And if this moves forward, it is expected to open in 2013, next spring. I apologize for the small writing that you may not be able to see, but essentially we'll start the design and plan review process once we have the property all assembled. That will include at least one, if not two, community meetings to talk to stakeholders about their preferences for site plan and development. Then we'll move to the city's official plan development process, the SPARC, the Site Plan and Appearance Review Committee, then to Plan Commission, and then to this body through First Planning and Development Committee and City Council. That's usually a 2 to 3 month process if all moves smoothly, and that summer, fall, they would be able to begin their construction process. And that can range, depending on the weather, several months, but their target and requirement is to be open by next spring through their lease with Trader Joe's.
Alderman Rainey.
How much involvement and interaction have we had with the company?
With Trader Joe's?
Yeah.
We've had, when we started this conversation, I know Wally likes to tell this story.
So, and I'll tell it again, Johanna was asked to go to both the Glenview and Northbrook Trader Joe's, left her business card, and heard from the Vice President of Real Estate from Trader Joe's the next Monday. So we had initial discussions with them early on. We've had periodic discussions with them, and then we had a meeting with their Vice President of Real Estate from Boston here at the Civic Center last Monday, where we talked about final points with the parking license agreement. So I think we've had more contact than probably normal. I think it's Trader Joe's preference not to have contact with the jurisdiction, but because of that initial contact that Johanna was able to make very early in this process, we've been able to stay in touch. And when Alderman Nguyen was still had questions and concerns about the parking agreement, the gentleman did not hesitate to get on an airplane, fly from Boston to Evanston to meet one-on-one with us to settle those final points.
I know these are minor points compared to all of the big deals that have gone down so far, or at least the proposed deals, but have we talked to them at all about hiring or being community-minded? Or, I mean, just wondering, when do we get to the touchy-feely stuff that makes some of our other companies in town good neighbors?
Others can reply as well. There was brief discussion of that at our meeting last week. I think clearly once they are here, they have a long history of being very community-minded. We talked about one of the aspects of all of their stores is the interior, and that they will often contract with local artists to paint murals of local scenes and things. And we asked about that, and while no guarantees were made, certainly their plan is to be involved, and if we can be helpful to connect them with local artists, they seem very open to that. As far as anything in the short term, I think really they're waiting to see once they get involved in the community once the building is open. So I feel very comfortable early on, and I think our very first discussion with Brant, I got it right this time. He talked about the company's awareness of the situation from 2008 and talked about the company's concern that they were not able to come to Evanston, and that Evanston remained on their short list of communities for a very long time. And while we may not have seen them in the intervening period, they were actively looking at the market. And while they are looking, as you know, Alderman Rainey, a big push in Florida right now and a big push in Texas, this is not really a growth market for Trader Joe's right now in the Midwest. But this was on the top of their list, and they were pleased we reached out to them over a year ago. And I think that it's really made a difference. I think otherwise they really are focusing in other parts of the country with their expansion and not looking at areas in the Midwest.
All right, and then this is the last question that we know that has been out there. Just to be clear, there is the beach will not become Trader Joe's Beach. That's
Thank
it.
you, Johanna. Alderman Burris.
I want to thank the Economic Development team for listening to my pleas for the return on investment and laying it out very clearly. I do appreciate that. And breaking out the numbers for what the city portion of the increase would be. Do we have numbers for what the increase through the other taxing jurisdictions would be?
Well, our portion of the tax bill is about approximately 20%, so you could extract that doing some simple math.
I just think it would be helpful to let everyone know that we're not just helping the city of Evanston, we're also helping the school districts as far as increasing in revenue as well. So it's not just one piece.
Thank you, Alderman Burris. Does anyone else have any questions? Alderman Nguyen. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. It has been moved and seconded to pass Ordinance 32012, authorizing the city manager to execute an assignment of real estate contract for the purchase of real property at 1223 to 1225 Chicago Avenue. Alderman Nguyen, did you want to speak?
I would just like to thank Johanna and all of the economic development staff for all of their hard work on this over a long period of time, and to thank Terrico as well.
Thank you. City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Burris. Aye. Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite. Aye. Alderman Nguyen. Aye. Alderman Wilson.
No.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tindem. Aye. Alderman Grover. Aye. Alderman Rainey. Aye. 8-1.
8-1, the motion passes. Next is Resolution 32R12, authorizing the parking license agreement with Gendel WNB LLC at 1223 to 1225 Chicago Avenue.
Move approval. Second.
Alderman Rainey. It's been moved and seconded. Alderman Rainey.
Madam Mayor, I'm really sorry. I tried to understand this and not have to ask a bunch of questions, but I'm a little confused at this moment. Is the $25,000 one-time license for the total for both properties, or is it individual for each of the properties?
Alderman Rainey, the total is $50,000. It's $25,000 per parcel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that it, Alderman Rainey?
I'm voting for it.
All right. Seeing no lights on for further discussion, City Clerk, would you call the roll? A2, yes.
Alderman Burris.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite. Aye. Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
No.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tindem. Aye. Alderman Grover.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
8-1.
8-1, the motion passes. Alderman Burris.
I'll be recusing myself from the next vote.
Thank you. Oops. Alderman Rainey.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask our legal counsel, is there any way to divide the question here regarding the purchase of the property versus the purchase of the land?
Purchase of the leasehold interest, is that what you?
Well, we're
sorry, just a
purchasing,
point
the
of
house
clarification.
is a separate purchase, is that correct?
No, it's just one transaction. We're just purchasing the underlying land. The leasehold interest will be taken care of by Terrico. They will be negotiating with the owner of the property, of that house.
Okay.
Not the property, the house.
But we're not worried about the house.
We are not.
We're just worried about the land.
That is not what's before you.
Okay.
Do you want to make a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move approval of ordinance 43012, authorizing the city manager to purchase land located at 1229 Chicago Avenue.
All right, do you want to move that and then suspend the rules afterwards?
Yes.
All right. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Seeing no lights on, City Clerk, would you call the roll for ordinance 43012, authorizing the city manager to purchase land located at 1229 Chicago Avenue?
Alderman Burris.
I recused.
Oh, sorry. Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite. Aye. Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
No.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tindem. Aye. Alderman Grover. Aye. Alderman Rainey.
No.
6 to 2, the motion passes. Alderman Nguyen?
Madam Mayor, I move to suspend the rules.
It's been moved and seconded to suspend the rules. Do we need a roll call? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Madam Mayor, I move approval.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 43012, authorizing the city manager to purchase land located at 1229 Chicago Avenue. Excuse me, City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Burris. I'm sorry. Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
No.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tindem. Aye. Alderman Grover. Aye. Alderman Rainey.
No.
6 to 2.
6 to 2, the motion passes. Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move adoption of Resolution 33R12, authorizing the parking license agreement with Gendel WNB LLC at 1229 Chicago Avenue.
It's been moved and seconded to Alderman Rainey.
Madam Mayor, I just want to let you and the council know that since my leadership in defeating A3 failed miserably, I will be voting for the license agreement.
Thank you. All right. It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 33R12. City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Burris. I'm sorry. Jeez. I won't call your name anymore. Alderman Fisk.
No, she can vote on this part, can't she?
I'm sorry, I just wanted a ruling on if I should vote for this or not, but I don't think it matters, so I won't. Keep it
Okay.
here.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite. Aye. Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
No.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tindem. Aye. Alderman Grover. Aye. Alderman Rainey. Aye. 7 to 1.
7 to 1, the motion passes. We could use a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Congratulations.